Dave Rubin is an author, comedian, and TV personality, best known for his political commentary. He is the host of the Rubin Report, a top-ranking talk show recognized as one of the most influential spaces for candid conversations about complex issues and current events. Dave is known for his iconoclastic and honest approach to big ideas and his unwavering support for free speech. He began his career as a stand-up comedian, and he continues to perform throughout the United States, utilizing his voice to highlight the absurdities of the country's increasingly polarized political landscape. He accompanied Jordan Peterson on an international speaking tour where they addressed hundreds of thousands of people across 3 continents. In an effort to combat big tech censorship, Rubin founded Locals.com, a subscription-based digital platform that empowers creators to be independent by giving them control over their content and data. His first book, Don't Burn This Book, Thinking for Yourself in an Age of Unreason, was a New York Times bestseller.
All right. Well, first off, I just want to say it's a pleasure to be with you guys. I wish I was doing this in person, but in these strange times that we live in, we've been reduced to these little Zoom boxes and things of that nature. But, talking about cancel culture is obviously something that I'm sadly very familiar with, and something that I've survived myself on several fronts. It's sort of funny because about 5 or 6 years ago, when I first started talking about cancel culture, before we were all calling it cancel culture, nobody really knew what it was. There was this weird momentum, I would say this sort of strange energy, mostly on college campuses, that they simply were not going to hear ideas that they did not like. Now, when I say they, I'm mostly talking about the students, but it really had the beginnings of, it was leaking into the teachers and it was leaking into the administrations. And I would go give talks, usually defending liberalism. I mean, this was the irony that I found myself in. I was defending freedom. I was defending open inquiry. I was, defending the idea that we can debate ideas and how to fight bigotry and things of that nature. And I was going to these college campuses all over the United States at first, and then several in Canada as well. And not only was I being protested, which, by the way, protesting is a God-given right as far as I'm concerned from an American perspective. If you live in a free society, of course you should be able to voice your opinion in opposition to someone. You can't do it violently and things of that nature. But I was being protested, but then there was something else that was happening, which was a constant shouting down, pulling fire alarms, bringing noisemakers, locking people out of rooms or locking people into rooms. And then it wasn't just me. It was obviously several people that I'm sure you guys are all familiar with, who were sort of in my crew, people like Dr. Jordan Peterson and Peter Boghossian and Sam Harris and Ben Shapiro and many more. And then it started escalating to not just, okay, we're not going to let these people speak because we're going to shout them down, but we're actually going to start burning down buildings. We are going to start violently stopping them from speaking. One of the most famous ones was when Ben Shapiro, who Ben is, I would say, a very, very mainstream conservative thinker. There's sort of a meme out there that this guy is somehow a far right person. I mean, to me, it's the furthest thing from the truth. He's sort of repackaging, I would say, 80s Reaganism. He went to speak at Berkeley University, which was once the home of free speech from a university perspective in America. And I think it cost them something like $200,000 to secure the event just so that he could speak. And this just sort of kept happening at the university level. And I would talk about it on my show. And what was interesting to me was a lot of people would say to me, they would say, Dave, when these kids get out of college, the real world will hit them and they'll realize what reality is. And, they'll have to pay their bills and everything will be just fine. Don't worry. The real world will show them what's what. And I think what we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years is that the real world has sort of folded. We have allowed a bunch of really terrible ideas that you should shout down people, that you should violently oppose your intellectual opponents, and so forth. We've allowed these ideas to leak into mainstream culture to the point that in the United States right now, I mean, in essence, all over progressive cities, Portland, Seattle, I'm here in Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York City. In essence, there are violent mobs that at any given moment, in the name of tolerance, they always do it in the name of tolerance. I'm talking about Black Lives Matter. I'm talking about Antifa, some of the other affiliated groups. In the name of tolerance, they decide to attack people on the streets, stop cars, pull people out, burn buildings down, and the rest of it. And this has leaked out. And now I would say the more dangerous part is not only is it leaked out first from the colleges, then into our streets, but now it's leaked out into virtually every institution that we have. I mean, I would, from an American perspective, whether it's an academic institution or it's a entertainment institution. Again, I'm here in Los Angeles, so you could talk about all of Hollywood. Everyone has sort of accepted these ideas that if you say virtually anything that is outside of mainstream, they're going to go ahead and they, in essence, have a right to go for your livelihood, go for your job and your work, go for your family, make sure that you're booted off social media and the rest of it. And now, we've got basically, I would say, half the country that feels like they suffer from they suffer from outsider think just for having thoughts that, say, 10 years ago were perfectly fine to have. So there's many examples I can give you guys on this. One of the most interesting ones to me personally was a few years ago, there was a front page New York Times Sunday article on how YouTubers were leading people to the far right and the alt-right. And they had a collage of many pictures of people. And some of the people that were included were Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro, who I already mentioned, but also Nobel Prize winning economist Milton Friedman. Apparently he was leading people to the far right and the alt-right. And then you had to open it up 2 pages in was a huge picture of my face saying I lead people to the alt-right. I don't know if you can see it right behind me, but my entire book was a defense of liberalism. It was a defense against the ideas of identity politics and everything else. But the reason I mention that is not for the victim points for me of, oh, the New York Times said something bad about me, but they feel that they can push these ideas so that they can, in essence, just take everybody out. And this is why I often make a point of talking about Tucker Carlson on my show, because, on any given day, Tucker Carlson says something that most of us believe to be true, or he says something that is somewhat politically incorrect, something like that. And what happens? Media Matters and the Daily Beast and CNN and MSNBC, they spend basically all day long trying to go for his advertisers, make sure that Fox can't put on a profitable product. And of course, even news organizations, these are businesses, these are people who want to put on a profitable program for their shareholders and everything else. It's a business, obviously. And I always defend Tucker, not only because I think he's directionally right when it comes to most of these ideas, but what they're trying to signal when they put me in the New York Times and say, oh, Dave Rubin's leading people to the far right, which couldn't be more ridiculous, or when they say Tucker Carlson is a white nationalist, or whatever they might say about any of these people, they're not really going for me or Tucker Carlson. What they're trying to do is they're trying to say, we can get the big fish. We can actually take out Tucker Carlson. And if we can take out Tucker Carlson, that's the signal to everybody else, which is we can take you out. And that's why what happened in the aftermath of January 6th at the Capitol was so dangerous. Look, there were several thousand people who showed up. Most of them were peaceful. We now know that a lot of people were allowed to be let into the Capitol and talk to cops. The people that did violent things, of course, should be dealt with, appropriately. But in essence, a few days later, the real long-term effects is not that the United States had an insurrection. There was no insurrection. These people had no guns. There was no plan to take over the government. The thing was done in hours. The real takeaway of that day, although you won't really hear this in the mainstream media, is that the president of the United States, the sitting president of the United States, in essence, was digitally assassinated. He was taken out of YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, so he can't listen to music, Pinterest, the rest of those sites. And it's like, well, who is actually more powerful? Is it the president of the United States, or is it some big tech oligarchs who can just get to decide what the president can say and when the president can say it? So again, that's just a signal to all of the Trump supporters, or not even, we don't even have to make this about Trump. It's a signal to anyone who is not woke. It is a signal to anyone who is not a progressive or a lefty or in mainstream orthodox democratic think, that if you say any of these things, you will be taken out. And then, of course, the other piece of this that just confuses everything is the influence that now big tech has over our lives. I mean, you know, everyone knows this. We are being manipulated in ways that we cannot imagine. Actually, just before I went live with you guys, I tweeted something out. I saw a picture where, you know, right now, Rand Paul, our senator from Kentucky here, who's mostly a libertarian, he has said that he's not going to take the COVID vaccine because he already had COVID. He believes he has enough antibodies and there's no science showing that he should have to take it. He's also a doctor, by the way, and he's making a personal choice. Well, if you look at Google searches on his name, you see all pieces condemning him for it. If you search on, say, DuckDuckGo or some of the other search engines, you see pieces that are sort of promoting him for that idea. So we are being filtered off into these very, very crazy ways where, depending on who you follow on Twitter, what Twitter lets you see, what recommended videos, I mean, this is another huge one, what recommended videos on YouTube they show when you're watching a particular video. So sometimes if you're watching my show, they might show you other episodes of my show. That would sort of make algorithmic sense, but they might say, oh, we don't like what Dave Rubin's talking about. That goes against the orthodoxy that we want to promote. So now we're going to show 10 videos that are completely counter to that. So we have just simply no way of knowing how we're being manipulated. And as we get manipulated more and more, there will simply be more and more calls to cancel and deplatform the rest of us. So I would end my initial remarks with this, which is that if I've learned anything over the last couple of years, is that if you stand up in the face of this thing, it will, to this point, it will not kill you. It will make your life very painful. It really can do that. And I understand people that don't want to lose their jobs. I understand people that don't want to get into fights with friends and spouses and family members. Nobody wants to stand up to the mob. You know, nobody really wants to be David versus Goliath. You know, we all know the story, but in that moment, if you were choosing your life, you would go, you know, I don't really want to be the little guy going against the big guy, because the chances I win are pretty slim. But I can tell you this, that every time I have stood up to it, no matter what hit piece is written about me, just in the last 2 or 3 days, Daily Beast and Gizmodo wrote about me because I started a tech company and they're calling me a far right winger and the usual nonsense. If you stand up for it, you signal to other people that they can survive too. That's what I was talking about with Tucker. They're going for Tucker because they want to signal that they can destroy him. But I would say it's our job as free thinking people. It's our job as individuals, and really our job as at this point, I would say, people that are trying to defend what is left of the West. And it may be not much left. Maybe we've lost already to some degree and we can't see it. I'm a little more hopeful than that generally. But if you stand up to the mob, you will survive. And not only will you survive, you will thrive. There are so many examples of this. You know, my show became a hub of people that were under attack from the mob, whether it was Professor Brett Weinstein at Evergreen College, you know, basically saying we can't discriminate on campus based on the color of skin. That became a controversial opinion. He was chased off campus. He's doing pretty well right now. Whether it was James Damore, the Google engineer, who said that these diversity and inclusion programs are actually racist. Well, Google did get rid of him, but he's got another job and he's doing okay too. And if you're ready to step in the fire, you can model a successful exit for other people. But otherwise we will all go down. You know, what this really is about is whether the ideas of freedom and of liberty and the ability to live in a country with those that you disagree with. I mean, that really is what this is about. If the modern left, if the wokesters and the Democrats and this new really radical left, I have no problem calling them Marxist progressives, the AOCs and the Bernie Sanders. If these people really had more power, do you think America would be more free or less free? And the answer obviously is less free, because there's no political position you're allowed to take against them where they won't say you're a racist and a bigot and the rest of it. And that's why those words just need to become meaningless. I'll always fight racism where it really exists. Ironically, these people find racism everywhere except the places that it does exist. So I would say it's on us to fight for the West right now. The intellectual elite has collapsed. We have very few trusted voices. The mainstream media and journalists, every time I say journalists, I have to use air quotes now. These people have absolutely had a complete dereliction of their duties. And it's on the few of us that remain to figure out how to fix this thing. And by the way, I think we can do it. That's really what I'll finish with. I think we can do it because this is what the human story is all about. There are always bad forces. There are always authoritarian regimes. There are always people that want to silence you. There are always people that want to jail dissenters and all of those things. And somehow humans find a way. So I sense that we're probably entering a darker time than we're even in right now. But within that, there's a lot of hope as long as we can still do this, which is talk back and forth. So it's a pleasure to be with you guys. I'm more than happy to take any questions or have as open a conversation as you'd like to.
Dave, in my book, Live Not by Lies, I write about how Alexander Solzhenitsyn and Václav Havel both said a version of what you said, that if someone is willing to stand up and take the abuse, they may not come out on top, but they at least show that it is possible to live in truth in a society of lies. And ultimately, that will draw people to their side to defeat the tyranny. But we have here with us today a distinguished professor from Poland who fought with the Solidarity trade union movement, resisted communism that way, and was there to see the fall of communism in his country, Dr. Ryszard Legutko. But he found in his own experience that the forces of tyranny found another way to come back. And I was wondering if, Dr. Legutko, if you could have a few words about what this looks like from your point of view, the things Dave is talking about, the cancel culture, from the point of view of someone who lived under communism.
Well, there are many things to say, but just let me select one. Language. I mean, the language was corrupted under communism, and the language has been corrupted now. I mean, we live in the world of the mendacious language. Now, you defend freedom of speech, and you are called a fascist, and those who prevent you from speaking are freedom fighters, right? And in every university or corporation, there are institutes, offices of pluralism and diversity or such like. These are gruesome institutions that impose conformity, right, and intimidate people. I mean, the words mean the opposite of what they should mean. I mean, when I hear the word diversity, I run for life. And so my question, I know how it emerged in the communist system, but I wonder if you can explain how you see it. I mean, when and how did it happen? Then all of a sudden, you are surrounded by a lie, or the language that is full of lies.
Yeah, it's a great question. I get asked this all the time, and I've asked this very question to other people, because it's where did this come from? How did this happen? How did yes mean no and up means down and left means right, and males have vaginas? I mean, none of it makes any sense, and yet it all came here, and suddenly people who were supposedly bright, I mean, people who were supposedly smart, accepted it wholly. There's a couple different arguments that I've heard on this, but most people say that this was the long march through the institutions, that in essence, the Marxists, roughly 30, 40 years ago, figured out that really the best thing that you could do is just get a whole bunch of lefty professors into the universities and have them teach all the wrong ideas. I mean, this is one of the reasons that, Bernie Sanders is constantly screaming about he wants free college for everybody. Now, first off, we know that nothing's free, but they just say free and they don't really mean it, and okay, fine. But if you really wanted to indoctrinate an entire generation of people into believing socialist ideas and Marxist ideas, where would you send them? Well, you would send them to free government colleges. I mean, Bernie is not calling to send young people to colleges so that they can learn about libertarian economics, right? He doesn't want them watching Thomas Sowell videos, but he knows, oh, what would be the best place to brainwash young people into the ideas that I care about? Well, a free government college, that would be the best way to do it. It actually sounds quite Soviet and communistic on its face, and yet somehow through an American lens, when he says it, he's somehow thought of as the good guy. Oh, he's so compassionate. He wants to do free things so that more people can be educated, even though we know it's going to be the complete reverse. But, you know, I heard you mention Solzhenitsyn, and, you know, when I was on tour with Jordan Peterson, he would often talk about Solzhenitsyn and talk about the Gulag Archipelago. And obviously Jordan actually wrote the preface when they re-released the book a few years ago. And I was watching Jordan on Tucker Carlson's Fox Nation show a couple weeks ago, and he said something that I think was quite extraordinary for these times that we live in, which is directly related to your question about truth. And what Jordan was saying was that when he was in his mid-20s, that he decided to tell the truth, that he felt that telling the truth in and of itself would give you the best outcome, even if that outcome was not great. Meaning that if you say the truth, it doesn't mean that good things are going to happen. In fact, bad things might happen. But whatever it is that happens as a result of the truth will be better than all the possible options that could have happened because of lies. And I thought he worded that quite well, and then went on to say, and I think this was the key part, and this is very much what we're missing in America right now. He said that saying the truth for truth's sake, with the consequences be damned, that is the ultimate expression of faith, because there's an ultimate argument related to that where you have to take the leap of faith. If you're going to say, I will tell the truth because I fundamentally believe that the truth is good and right, well, that's an actual argument for faith. And I think much of what we're seeing in the United States right now, and the reason that words don't have their proper definitions, and the reason why when you say diversity, you run when you hear the word diversity, because diversity doesn't mean diversity. They mean diversity of immutable characteristics. Nobody cares about that. I don't care if I was sitting in a room what people look like. I care about what they think, what their actions are, what their beliefs are. And I think what has happened here in the United States right now is we have completely traded out some sort of either belief or tradition for, in essence, secularism on steroids. That's sort of what we've got right now. We have people that think, oh, if you would just give them enough power, just let them brainwash enough people, just let them take enough from this person and give to this person, that they can create the perfect system. And of course, time tells us that that is simply untrue, because humans are the problem in the perfect system, because we as humans obviously are imperfect.
I have a question, Dave. You talk a lot about, YouTube, Twitter, and so on, but my question, as an European guy, it's why do the conservative people and businessmen in United States don't arrive to create a different technological platform? In France, we always think that it will be the solution, and in a kind of way, we don't understand why it doesn't happen.
I love this question because I'm very much in the thick of this right now. So I started a tech company about 2 years ago called locals.com. And the idea was we need to build some things so that people have digital homes online. As someone that puts videos out on YouTube and podcasts and all of those things, I'm very much beholden to YouTube and to Twitter and to Facebook on any given moment. I mean, YouTube could kick me off right now. I have no way of stopping them from doing that. YouTube or Twitter, they could just announce that they're flipping their format. They could just say tomorrow, we've decided we're not allowing political content or anything. So now we've got quite literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that are making their livelihoods on these platforms that are completely in submission, in effect, to the overlords to do whatever they want. So I would say a few years ago, you were totally right. The conservatives, the libertarians, they were not funding anything. they were afraid. I mean, it gets us back to where we started. They were completely afraid that even if they gave some money somehow to any new technology, to any new business, that would cause them to be canceled. I think something interesting has shifted in the last few months. And I would liken that back to the January 6th events at the Capitol, because after that, you may remember about a week later, Parler, which had come up as a sort of Twitter alternative for, let's say right-leaning people or conservative, it had garnered about 21 million users. That's an extraordinary amount of people. And what happened was Amazon just basically blew up their servers. They said, oh, something related to the Capitol happened on Parler, and Amazon just took out the competition. Now, ironically, it turned out actually that more coordination for the events that day took place on Facebook than on Parler. But of course, nobody did anything to Facebook. But what happened after that was, I think suddenly people saw that as a massive escalation. The businessmen that you're talking about, the VC guys, the people with money, suddenly they saw something that we hadn't seen before. It was one thing to see people be shadow banned or they can delete someone's account or that sort of thing. But the fact that they could just basically nuke a server, that they could just take out an entire website of 21 million people with the snap of a finger, that was a massive escalation. And right after that, suddenly, I think more libertarian and conservative-minded investors started looking around and saying, we need some answers to some of this. So I was able to bring on some truly fantastic innovators and investors onto Locals. We're working on all sorts of decentralized storage and decentralized payments and the rest of it. But to further really answer your question, we need much more of it. It's not enough. We're fighting Disney in essence right now. We're fighting billion-dollar corporations with extraordinary resources that we really can't even imagine. So how do we start creating new culture? How do we start creating new movies and new books? And we also need new stories. Everything that we have right now is just a retread of something old. We just repeat the same comic book movies. We repeat the same Star Wars stories. And those things, because they've all sort of replaced traditional religious stories, they're now owned by evil corporations. I mean, Disney, in effect, is a Disney character corporation. Disney would be the bad guy in a Disney movie. So we need conservatives and libertarians to really put their money where their mouth is. I think particularly on the libertarian side, libertarians sort of thought, oh, I can just make my money however I make my money, and I'll just stay out of this whole thing and it won't come for me. I think, and again, I would link this back to the Parler thing. I think a lot of people realized after that, oh, it's coming for you one way or another. So if you want to be a private businessman, whatever that is, whether you own a restaurant or you're selling t-shirts, you still need the ability to use those platforms as a way of getting word out there. So if those platforms aren't going to be accessible into the future, you have to start funding things. So there is some hope there. Oh, and one other thing on this, Silicon Valley, which, mostly was the tech hub in San Francisco, the Bay Area in California, as it's become more and more lefty with a really awful mayor and a terrible governor here in California, they're all fleeing because of high taxes and regulation. And where are they going? They're going to Florida. Miami is now becoming a tech hub. Miami, which has a Republican mayor and a Republican governor, obviously, in Ron DeSantis. And so there are new businesses being built as we speak, but we need more and more people to be brave.
Hi, so I wonder how your life has changed since you became free speech guy. I mean, you weren't originally a conservative. You never described yourself as a conservative. In fact, you've often said that certainly on many issues, you're not one. And yet now you're here addressing this conference, you're talking about conservatives and libertarians. So you said you need to stand up. That's obviously true. And your standing up hasn't hurt you in the way it could hurt, say, some middle manager at Unilever. But your life must have changed. What's that been like?
Yeah, that's a good question, because, people only see us, those of us that are public people, if you're on YouTube or you're on television, people sort of don't realize that we're human beings in an odd way. You watch TV and you just see that person in the box and you go, that's Tucker Carlson. It's sort of like watching a cartoon character or a fictitious character, but there's obviously a human cost in all of these things too. I would say, I think the thing that put me on the map is that I was very honest and open about my political evolution. People saw over the last 5 years my frustrations with the left. You can go back to 5 years ago watching videos where I was saying, hey guys, we lefties, still referring to myself as a lefty, we're the ones that are failing liberalism. We're the ones that are instituting cancel culture and taking people out and not debating ideas. And what I found through that was that the conservatives, who I had some political disagreements with, I would say less now, but I had some political disagreements with them. The conservatives were just always open. They were saying, hey, Dave, you want to talk about this stuff? We can agree to disagree. Let's do it. So on a very personal note, I would say I've lost a lot of friends, some of them, from being on my show, but even personally, we've all been through this. Family members turn on you. All sorts of terrible things happen when you put that line in the sand, when you say, this is who I am, and I'm going to fight for what I believe. And I'm sorry if that's not what you thought I was, but it's much better to stand for what you believe in and be hated than to kneel for something you don't believe in and be loved. I mean, I think we all fundamentally understand that. So I would say I lost a lot of friends, but then I started gaining new friends and new connections that really started to feel much more authentic. When I'm around conservatives, and again, I have some marginal differences with conservatives, but I have no problem calling myself a conservative at this point. I would say conservatives have proven themselves, generally speaking, conservatives have proven themselves to know what they believe and why they believe it. If you sit in a room with a bunch of conservatives, you can ask them, well, where do rights come from? And you can have a great debate about that. You can ask them about the fundamental founding documents of the United States and why they're important and why God-given rights are more important than states-given rights. You can have these really rich conversations, and then maybe we disagree on a tax rate, maybe we disagree on the death penalty, something like that. But it's very obvious to me that as I've shifted, I've been welcomed by a group of people who are the outsiders. There's no doubt about it, right? You guys all know this. If you once you go out there and say you're conservative, you're going to get a lot of hate. You're going to be outside of the cultural norms. But what you will find, I think, and my life is an example of this. And I just on Saturday night, I had a group of 20 people over for dinner, which I'm fairly certain is illegal still here in California, but I don't really care about that at this point. But basically all sort of what I would say are new school conservatives. So when I say conservative, it doesn't mean that you know exactly what I think about every specific political point. When I say conservative, I'm here to conserve the West. I am here to conserve, in many cases, liberalism, but I'm here to conserve freedom in America. And that to me is the biggest political movement if we're to fix this thing, that's the biggest political movement of the future. I mean, what a wide tent. If you took traditional religious conservatives, you took libertarians, you took the disaffected liberals, and you said, wow, there's a whole bunch of us here, and we don't agree on some pretty profound stuff. I mean, even now, I've gone to some conservative conferences in the last year or two. There's a group called Atheists for Liberty that is now welcome at conservative events. That's not really something that would have happened a couple of years ago. But I think people on the right are saying, okay, most of us are believers, but here are these people that are completely secular, but they are fighting for freedom and individual rights and the things that we care about. So let's find common cause. So I would say at the personal level, if you stand up for what you believe in, and then you suddenly start talking to some of the people who maybe you thought were your intellectual enemies or opponents, you will find something very rich there. So for what once were a lot of stresses related to all of this, it's very stressful to lose friends and family and have online mobs come for you and all of those things. For all of that, the richness on the other side now has well been worth it, and obviously, that's come with, career success and some degree of financial success as well. But I wake up with purpose every day. That really is what I think every day. There is no day that I wake up that I don't have stuff to do that I want to do that I feel is important. And I think that really is in some ways, that's the most important thing you can figure out in life. If I could just mention Jordan Peterson one more time, he would often talk about that, because people think that the goal in life is to be happy. but that's not really the goal. The goal is to find purpose. Why are you here? And then through that, you will hopefully find some degree of happiness. But we've done something very backwards, where we're always telling people they should be finding happiness. But happiness is a result of purpose. Happiness, you can't get happiness first. So I wake up every day, I have something to do. I've been able to, build several businesses and employ a bunch of people who I love working with, and who, by creating these businesses, I've been able to put my conservative and libertarian ideas into action. And that's pretty great, because then when I come on my show and I tell people what I think, I go, yeah, that's how I live my life. And that's incredibly rewarding.
I was going to say that you've said you're a liberal, and I would describe myself as a liberal conservative, and I think that both of us probably believe that we want to protect the citizen, give him the largest amount of liberty that is practical, and we've normally interpreted that to mean we want to protect that liberty against government. But of course, recently we've seen that it's threatened at least as much in these days by the big tech companies, for example, and even more so by an alliance between government and those companies. So I want to throw out two proposals for reform and get your view on them. One is to say, look, since we are not going to get rid of the intrusions on liberty of the Civil Rights Act, and since practically everyone in America has got those protections, every group you care to name, except one, which is people with conservative political views, our views, and shouldn't we really bend our principles slightly and add political opinion to the list of those with political opinion to the list of protected classes? And secondly, since the big tech companies benefit from the protection they get from government against libel suits, shouldn't we make that protection contingent upon their applying the First Amendment in their decisions on what and what not to publish?
These are great, they're great questions, not only philosophically, but sort of technically also, because, I see there's this constant debate in the United States about what do you do about big tech, and do you break them up? Do you regulate them? What is it that you're supposed to do? Now, my libertarian side always says to me that the idea that we could regulate these companies properly is just crazy. I mean, really, if you think about it, just at the most sort of granular, obvious level, try to imagine a government regulator walking into the offices of Google and saying, okay, we need to see your algorithm to make sure you guys are treating information fairly and not biasing based on political opinion and everything else. We need to look at it and see what's what. I mean, first off, I'm not even sure that the Google engineers at this point have full control of the algorithm. There's a lot of people that have been talking about this for a long time. The algorithm is constantly being rewritten, and machine learning and everything else. Is anyone even in control of it anymore? Which is sort of like, if you could do a science fiction reference, we're sort of like the machines have taken over at some level. This is sort of like a Terminator 2 situation. So the idea that the government could come in and say, we're going to fix this, that doesn't really make sense to me, even if I had some more inclination to do it. I think what you could possibly do, because of the ties that you're talking about related to big tech and government, I think maybe you could do some antitrust stuff, that maybe you could break up these companies at some level. Now, I get it. This is where my libertarian side still says, no, you can't do it. But they have such extraordinary monopoly power at this point that they could take anyone out at any given minute. But not only could they take anyone out at any given minute, they could decide to destroy you in, again, ways that we really can't imagine. If you were to say something publicly that they really didn't like, could they not refilter and reorganize information to send a whole bunch of bad stories about you right up top and bury all the good things? Could they not have your Wikipedia page destroyed, or a series of other things? I mean, I mentioned what's happening to Rand Paul right now on Google. I mean, Google Rand Paul right now, you will see all negative results about his feelings on vaccination. So on that side, it's extremely complex. And my broadest answer would be, I always believe in human ingenuity. I believe that the human mind, no matter how complex the problem, can always figure out a way to do something better. That's why I put my money where my mouth is and I started locals.com. But I just always believe humans can figure out a way. Governments, and especially our United States government right now, are so big and bloated and unable to deal with small issues, that's like turning the Titanic. The iceberg is there and they're trying to turn this thing, but it's going to take a long time to turn. Where I would rather believe in the individual, believe in people's ability to build things for themselves and manage through all that. As for the first question related to should there be some sort of protections around political beliefs, philosophically, I think this is a really interesting one, because my preference would be, in essence, that there would be no protections for anybody at some level, that really we have individual rights and your immutable characteristics, whether you're white or black or gay or straight or male or female, would be completely irrelevant. Now, the problem with that, unfortunately, at this point is we've racialized everything, and we've used identity in such a deeply dangerous way that the ship has sort of sailed on that. So, we have all these hate crime laws and all of these things. I mean, frankly, I don't care. I don't necessarily think a hate crime, let's say directed at a specific group, should be treated any differently than if you just randomly attacked somebody. I mean, the action ultimately is the same, but we've racialized things to a very dangerous degree. So your question, should we have some sort of, in essence, First Amendment protections related to big tech to protect outside political think? I'm sort of with you on it, but I will take one counterpoint, which is that the more that we tell these companies what to do, so the more that the government comes in and says, Twitter, you must allow these people to be on there. YouTube, you must allow these people to create videos. The more that we actually strengthen YouTube's and Twitter's grip on the public square. I actually think that ultimately, if they just kept getting rid of people, they got rid of all of you fine gentlemen I'm looking at right now, they got rid of me, started getting rid of people that support us, people will find new ways to go. And what I would fear is if the government comes in and says, no, you guys are the public square, that's how the world exists in 2021, well, then these things will never go anywhere, and it will get harder and harder for competition to bubble up. So I think we could split the difference. I would be for something, there's a bunch of people that talk about a digital bill of rights, that these companies would have to have basic standards that would be sort of across the board. I could go for something like that. But you got to be careful what you wish for, because before you know it, you've emboldened them to stay forever. And you take big government and you combine it with big tech, you have a much bigger problem.
Dave, you were talking earlier about the good things Republicans and conservatives have done, but let's talk about the bad things. I'd like to know what you think we're doing wrong. From my point of view, we are too quick to think that just because we've done something performative, because, say, Donald Trump ticked off the libs, that we have actually struck a blow for freedom. In fact, the left are moving through the institutions, continuing to move through the institutions, making policy changes that substantively affect our lives, whereas many conservatives seem to be simply satisfied with having told them off. Am I wrong about that?
My friend Michael Malice, who's an anarchist, I think one of the best political thinkers we have in the country right now, he often says that conservatism is liberalism at the speed limit. And I think in essence, that's what you're getting to. What is it that conservatives are actually conserving as the left has marched through the institutions, as they own all of Hollywood, all of the cultural norms that are set by the terms that the left gives. Now, I should say, I'm as the new guy to the right, let's say, or the new guy to the conservative movement, I think there are probably a few things that I don't quite see yet that you might see having been in it longer, right? So it's like when you get invited to somebody's house, you go into the house, you don't immediately start criticizing everything. You kind of see the good stuff and you say, well, we can work with this. So I would say the most fundamental problem that the conservatives have is that because the table is set by the left, conservatives are constantly just responding to the left. Every conservative thinker, every conservative pundit, politician is constantly responding to the left. And by the way, I really believe you have to give Trump some credit here, which is that Trump basically went in and said, I will not play by your rules. Doesn't mean that everything that Trump did was great. I ended up supporting Trump, and I certainly wish he was president still. But Trump went in and said, I will not play by your rules. The media and the Democrats are one machine, and I will start calling it out for what it is. And that's why we saw just absolute hysteria by the media and the Democrats for 2 years. And now the same things that they were hysterical about with Donald Trump, they don't say a word about. So, when Donald Trump was doing stuff at the border, we had kids in cages and it was a genocide. Now, even I believe just this morning, the New York Times put up a piece that it's not such a big deal anymore. He got them to flip on everything. As to what conservatives genuinely could do better, it sort of gets to a question a few minutes ago, which is, well, first off, conservatives know how to build things in reality. Conservatives and libertarians believe in reality. Conservatives and libertarians believe in math, believe in business, believe in free markets. These are the things that explode human ingenuity and allow freedom to flourish. We should be building better things. So even though before I said, some VC guys are now funding things, we need conservatives to fund more things. We also, and I think this is the biggest problem, we need more conservative politicians willing to fight. And the reason we don't have that is because liberals tend, and lefties especially, but really the new Marxists, they believe politics is everything. They don't believe in a higher power. They don't believe that there was something before them. They believe that they are the end-all be-all to the universe. Thus, they can get really hysterical, angry, authoritarian people into positions of power. And if you listen to them, they always have a solution for everything, and they have righteous indignation and all of that. Conservatives, libertarians, we generally think that there's something else going on here. There is something else that is a through line of the history of humanity. We don't want government to be God. We don't want the table to be set by the big machine that's above us. So most of us just kind of get out of the game. I mean, most people, I think most conservatives think if I just, do right by my family and my local community and all that, then the thing won't come get me. And I think that line of thinking is not quite working. And that being said, I fully understand why conservatives don't want to get into politics. I mean, Trump did it, and Trump fought and fought and fought and fought, and at the end, they took him out. He's not even on Twitter anymore. So a good conservative thinker who's a decent human being who wants to, live a good life, like, why would you get into politics? And the proof is in the pudding on that. Here in California right now, where in essence, we have a one-party state. The Democrats have run California. They run all the cities. We know that crime is rampant in our big cities. Homelessness is rampant. Drug use is rampant. Our economy's tanking. Our taxes are high. Our regulations high. And yet even now, as we're recalling our governor, there's a full-on recall of Gavin Newsom here in California. In essence, there are no conservatives running. There's Caitlyn Jenner, which is an outlier on several fronts. And then there's 2 or 3 people that are probably just fine, but nobody's ever heard of them. Where are the good people willing to stand up? So I would say, as the new guy to the conservatives, I would love to see some conservatives with a little more juice, a little more, let's fight and let's do it. By the way, a lot of people then turn to me and say, Dave, why don't you do it? But I'm busy. I don't know that I want to be running California. But I would say conservatives fighting, man, realize that this is a fight. It's not just something to respond to, it's something to lead about.
Eric, do you have anything to say about liberty and patriotism together in France? Because in a way, patriotism is an element in our conversation as well as liberty.
Exactly. I think we, in France, with conservative, we feel the same things than you in United States. When we have our French flag in our garden, in the fact, we don't have it in our garden, because if we have it, we are fascist. It's always the thing which happens in France. What do you think about Europe,
Yeah, this is an incredibly important piece of this conversation, that what the lefties in essence have done in all of our countries, in all of the Western nations, have somehow conflated nationalism and patriotism and pride in one's country with somehow fascism or bigotry or something like that. I have no problem saying, and I would welcome any of you to disagree with me on this, the United States, in my opinion, is the greatest country in the history of the world. We have welcomed in more people from more walks of life the poor and huddled masses, as it says on the Statue of Liberty, to come to the United States. And almost in every case for 250 years, people have done better in the United States for themselves and their ancestors than in whatever country they fled. Even now, with all the problems that we have, people still want to come to the United States. Nobody wants to leave the United States. So this issue about patriotism, one of the things that I found that really helped wake me up to reality in the last year was about a year ago. It was even less than a year ago. I think it was in September or so. So it's only, 8 or 9 months ago. I went to a Trump rally here in Beverly Hills in Los Angeles. Now, remember, Los Angeles, this is a blue Democrat lefty state, blue Democrat lefty city, Hollywood, the whole thing. I went to a Trump rally. There were thousands of people there. They were from all different backgrounds and, genders and colors and all of that nonsense. But they were proud to be holding that American flag. And I realized when I was there, I had forgotten what that was like, that we don't get any messages of American pride in America anymore. Try to imagine going to a lefty rally, a BLM, Antifa, even just a basic Democrat rally, where they would be talking about American pride and how wonderful this country is and how incredible the founding documents are, and that America is this idea that we can all make it better. I mean, you just simply can't see it on that side. And yet I would go to Trump rallies, and yeah, there were plenty of Trump flags too, but there was a sense of America's this great thing and we're losing our grip on it. So what you said is exactly right. When the media would cover these events, they would imply that these somehow were fascists or racists. I never saw one incident. I ended up going to several Trump rallies. I never saw anyone racist there. I never saw anyone bigoted. I never saw anyone homophobic or anything. So I would say those of us on the right, we desperately need to grasp onto patriotism now. We need to grasp. This isn't just, oh, free markets can solve everything. It's that we have to really grab onto whatever our national ethos is of freedom. By the way, you guys in France have a pretty wonderful history of freedom that we built upon in America. And I've heard from many people in France that this is a huge problem over there. So we all need to do this. And one of the things I've been tweeting out for the last couple of weeks, I want Trump to start rallies again, not necessarily because it has to be Trump that will be the next candidate for the Republicans, but especially after a year and a half of COVID and lockdowns and depression and all of the things that people are dealing with, we need those rallies again. People need to see people again, realize that there's something to be proud of here. I mean, what message is the United States government giving us right now that has anything to do with pride in America? Absolutely none. I mean, it would almost be hard to imagine Joe Biden honestly giving a speech that was based in pride in America, because the base of his party, the future of his party, does not believe America is good. One of the most incredible moments of the Democratic primary was when Pete Buttigieg, who was the mayor from South Bend, Indiana, who was running for president on the Democratic side, he turned to Bernie and he said, Bernie, you want to burn it all down and I don't. And Pete was actually right. The progressives are here to burn it down. And the only way we stop them from burning it down is through patriotism. It is through realizing how incredible and rare this country is. And I hope we'll start some rallies again, because it sort of goes to what I was saying before. You need to map some of these things out for people. People need to see, and this goes to your question about what conservatives do. Conservatives need to start showing people, hey, we're actually the fun people. We're the interesting people. We're the creative people. We're the open-minded people. They're all hysterical and angry and all of the things they purport us to be. But let's get out there and show people that's not who we are. We're actually having fun. And I mean, try to even think about it this way. Where do you think the next great music or art is going to come from? Do you think it's going to come from the Marxist left, where you can't have any individual expression? Or do you think it's going to come from this new thing on the right? I mean, the answer is pretty obvious to me.
I want just to follow up on something that was said before about the role of the state or the government, as you say in America, and the weakness of conservative institutions. We are now in a country which has a strong conservative government, and it shows, and it is hoped that the institutions that have been built by this government, with the help of this government, will survive even if the results of the election will be different. And simply speaking, I cannot imagine in Europe, I cannot imagine strong conservative institutions without the role of the government, a big political party. And so the American or the libertarian idea that somehow civil society produces or reproduces the social fabric regardless of who is in power, or whether it's Obama or whether it's Biden, doesn't make a difference, because the social fabric is there. Maybe that's the case in the United States, but not here. In Europe now, there are, I think, only 2 conservative governments that are viciously attacked by the political establishment, not only political establishment, but that is something that that's the European perspective. We need kind of strong political assistance.
Personally, I'm a bit libertarian too. I like free market and so on. But you know, in France, for example, the right is essentially with worker class. And the best issue is to convince them to vote for us. And if we are too much liberal, we won't convince them. And my question will be, how did you success to convince worker class to vote for you with the kind of speech of Donald Trump to the election just 6 years ago?
And I think I could add there that Boris Johnson could be cited on your side of the argument, because in the English tradition, which is closer to America than Europe's, I think the working class has actually traditionally and for a long time been a strong supporter of conservative governments. The Tory party got half of its vote from the third of the working class that voted for it right the way through the 20th century. But over to you, Dave, if you could sum up.
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch to discuss here. I mean, first off, I would say, I think one of the reasons that in some ways Eastern Europe especially is better suited for this fight than America is because you guys have had to deal with communism and socialism on your shores and in your more recent history, where we've dealt with, we fought Nazism from afar, but Nazism wasn't on our shores. So I think in some ways, because of the actual reality on the ground of what your history is within the last 60 or to 70 years, I think that uniquely sets you up to fight, to understand. There's a history there to understand it. To the first point, I do agree that the purely libertarian take on this, which is just, we can just free market everything and that will, generation after generation, just allow more and more freedom. It's just not enough. You need a national ethos, and you need the government to defend that ethos. I think that the founding documents of the United States are basically as close as you can get as a synthesis to sort of belief and freedom and rights and all of those things. I think we've gotten as close as it can get. And that being said, it is in very tenuous position right now. In terms of what we can do to fight, look, one of the things that I'm struck by, even in this conversation, is that when I look in the YouTube comments or when people reach out to me on email or whatever it might be, that there are people in Hungary, there are people in France, there are people in India and in Israel and in Mexico, all thinking the same things. We all grow up in very different places with different socioeconomic statuses, with different cultural norms, different religions, all of those things. And yet, when I started talking about freedom more, which really is all that I was doing on my show, suddenly all of these people in every corner of the earth were reaching out to me saying, what you're saying is making sense to me. And I think what we're realizing now in America is that it's a republic if you can keep it. That we have this incredible 250-year run of freedom here. We didn't do everything right. We had, one of the things that the left loves to do is sort of take all of our norms of today and apply it to all the people of yesterday. And is it true that our founders owned slaves? It is. George Washington owned slaves, and at the same time, after the Revolutionary War, many people wanted him to remain the general of the army and the president of the United States, and he refused to do that. I mean, what an extraordinary person. I will not take this power. So we have done something so right here, and that now is up for debate. And it seems like it's up for debate in all of the countries that we've mentioned here. And there's a really authoritarian movement on the march, and it's coupled, it's fueled, I would say, by identity politics, and then it's supercharged by big tech. And what does it hate more than anything else? It hates the individual more than anything else. It hates that some of us don't want to just be a cog in the system. It hates that we want to come up with new solutions, that we want answers that are not purely political. I mean, the sickness that's running across the West right now is that everyone thinks that politics is the answer to everything. I would say politics is the answer to almost nothing. But as conservatives, we've got to figure out, if there's an encroaching political movement on you, how do you use politics to fight it? And I think that's really where I'm interested in spending a lot of my sort of intellectual capacity and the conversations that I have, which is, okay, there's a horrific movement on the march. We all know it's here. It's on our shores. It's in our institutions, all of these things. Well, how do we fight it without being the people that want to use those levers of power all the time? And this is the great challenge for all of us. I believe we can do it. And as I said at the beginning, I believe that humans will always beat these authoritarian movements. We've done it before. We've done it again. We've faced worse things than we're facing right now. But that doesn't mean that this is going to be easy. It's going to be hard, and I don't know how much worse it can get before. However, it might be interesting if America starts having to look elsewhere for some of the answers. If we have to start looking to Hungary, if we have to start looking to Poland, some of these countries that now are coming around to more conservative governments. That would be a really interesting take on all of this, because maybe we need some help from the outside. That's not something the US is really great at. We're used to, having everybody look at us, but maybe we need to look elsewhere. And that's why I enjoy having conversations such as these.
Well, on behalf of my colleagues on the platform and on my colleagues at the Danube Institute, Dave, I'd like to thank you very warmly for coming along and demonstrating that the use of their technology can be used also to spread the right ideas. Thank you very much indeed.
At least for now. It was my pleasure. Thank you so much.